So one of the questions that we get most about Amanita muscaria is in regards to dosing. People want to know, how much do they take? And as you know, there's a bit of nuance to that. So could you kind of tell people and give them a basic rundown on how you dose Amanita muscaria?
Yeah, well, I mean, it really depends on what people are looking for. There's different range of doses from microdose to heroic dose. Everybody's physiology is going to be completely different. So what might work for somebody may not work for another person. Some person might need 3-4 grams to get to a heroic dose for them, where others like myself might need 15 to 20 grams. So
Right.
it all really depends on what somebody's looking for, and then it takes a lot of testing and trial and error to really figure out what's best for each individual.
Yeah, what we took, what was it? We each took probably about 10 grams each last night. And I would say for the two of us, the 10 grams was sort of a moderate dose for both of us, whereas for some other
Yeah.
people, 10 grams would be a lot. It seems like Christian and I are both somewhat naturally tolerant. And so, yeah, I guess that's where like a lot of the nuance of this comes in, is it does require a bit of this like personal experimentation. We
Yeah.
try and be really like transparent about that. It would be disingenuous, I feel like, for us to say, hey, 2 grams is going to get you like right here. But with that being said, what are some of like the basic kind of parameters that we've tried to give people with like the dosage and dosage chart, if you will?
Yeah, and I mean, just on that too, like Eric, who's another member of this company, he takes 3 to 5 grams, and he's like way further out than we were
Yep.
last night. So it's just,
Yep.
yeah, it's going to be different for each individual, and then it takes some trial and error and experimentation to figure out what works for you. The general dosing guideline that we look at is generally around zero point 0.2 grams to 2 grams would be a microdose. From 2 grams to 5 grams, that's generally a low dose. From 5 to 10 would be a medium dose, 10 to 15 would be a strong dose, and then 15 plus would be that heroic dose. But again, that's not consistent with everybody. Some people might find 5 grams, like Eric, is a heroic dose for them. So,
Obviously, if somebody has the raw caps that they're wanting to consume, they can take those raw caps and use some sort of scale to, weigh up, say, 5 grams, right? But say they made a tea, and we're going to get into that later, and there's going to be a whole separate video that we will link to here, teaching you how to make your own Amanita tea and how to decarboxylate it. But if somebody does make a tea, how would they dose that?
volumetric dosing is what we'd call that. So, you're dosing by the volume of the liquid itself. So, let's say you have a 15-gram bag of Amanita caps. You brew up a tea. You mix it in your pot of water with some lemon juice. You boil for 20 to 30 minutes. You decarboxylate the ibotenic acid into muscimol, and then you can dose out based on the volume of the liquid. So let's say you have 2 cups of liquid, and in your end final tea product, you can do 1 cup, and that would be half of 15 grams, so 7.5 grams. One of the great methods that Amanita Dreamer brought to the public was the ice cube method, which I think is a really wonderful way to do this. Let's say you have 15 grams brewed up in a tea. Well, you could then pour that into 15 ice cube trays and try and get them just about all consistent as far as level in each ice cube, and then you have a gram per ice cube, and that could be a great microdose for anybody. If you remember earlier, we had the zero point 0.2 to 2 gram dose range generally for a microdose. So yeah.
Yeah. And so, the majority of what we sell, our biggest product is Amanita muscaria. It seems to be, a fan favorite, but we do sell a couple of other types of Amanita as well, too. The Amanita regalis and the Amanita pantherina. So how do people go about dosing those?
Regalis is generally 2 to 3 times more potent than Pantherina, and Pantherina is generally around twice as potent as Regalis. So we're just dividing that dosing table down by 2 to 3 if it's Regalis, and then by 5 to 6 if we're looking at Pantherina. I think it's also really important. Like we mentioned, everybody's physiology is different. So start low, start slow, build your way up. You can always drink more. You can't always drink less. You can always eat more. You can't always eat less. And then, after experimentation, one will find what works properly for them. Like we mentioned, some people might really like to take 10, 15 grams, where other people might really like the 2 to 3 gram level. So just play around and experiment. And then if there's concern, or one is looking for easeability, we offer gummies, capsules, chocolate bars that are all dosed out very, meticulously. So that's another good option for people.
Yeah, yeah, and I think one last important nuance to include in all of this is that sometimes it seems like different batches, different regions, whether they're closed caps or open caps, the potency from batch to batch of Amanita, even if it is Amanita muscaria, can vary as well too. So that's something for people to keep in mind. There might be some days that you go and take 2 grams and it feels different than when you took 2 grams a few days ago. So yeah, I guess just start small, work your way up.
Yeah, and closed caps are generally, so the production of ibotenic acid slows down as the caps mature. So closed caps are less mature, they're younger, so they have higher concentrations of ibotenic acid, which converts into higher concentrations of muscimol. We find generally that closed caps seem to be 10 to 20% more potent than open caps, but that it's a variable. And each cap, you can get hot caps every now and then. So you might have one cap that's significantly more potent than the next cap. And this is where things like volumetric dosing or making teas, it homogenizes the product, or a powder, for instance. You have many caps blended down into one consistent material. So it homogenizes the material and makes it consistent in dosing. But honestly, having hot caps every now and then can be kind of fun. So it's kind of a, there's an intuitive aspect to it where I feel like you kind of get what you need at any point in time. So sometimes you might need a little bit more than you're expecting.
Yeah, and Amanita does seem to lend itself to this ability of redosing, right? If you take a small amount and you feel like you might want more, we recommend to wait a good maybe hour and a half to see how things are settling in for you, because the onset can have a bit of a delay like that. But you can redose it if you want to take more. And this is another interesting facet of all of this is redosing and tolerance. It doesn't seem to be really solidified how tolerance exactly works with
Mm-hmm.
Amanita, but we have a lot of like personal anecdotal data between ourselves and then obviously our entire customer base. So like, what would you tell people about how tolerance kind of works with all this?
I honestly didn't start noticing tolerance until recently. So like I think this is another important aspect about utilizing Amanita is that it's very intuitive, and like it's a really wonderful opportunity to tune into your intuition. Because in my personal experience, very recently, I've been using more than I've used in my entire life, on a weekly or monthly basis, and it's been because I'm going through an evolutionary spurt, we'll say, a growth spurt. Um, and I started to notice a tolerance build up after, a month of using heavier than I've used at any point in time. But there really seems to be very minimal, if not no tolerance, if one is using very low doses or microdosing. However, when one starts to use larger doses more frequently, it does seem to build up, although it takes quite some time. And then in my personal experience, if I take 3, 4, 5 days off, it completely resets to baseline. That is my experience. It could be different with other people. Everybody's physiology is different, but it's something to note. It doesn't seem to build up tolerance anything like most other substances out there, but there is an aspect of it for sure.
Right. Especially like most other sort of GABAergic substances,
Yep.
right? And I guess the last sort of little tidbit of this really plays into the whole tolerance thing. But, does this cause addiction within people? Do people become addicted to Amanita? Do people have withdrawals from it? What is that like?
We haven't seen any of that, which makes it super special and powerful. Most GABAergic substances are extremely addicting. You think alcohol and benzos are the two substances, and barbiturates are the substances that people can die from withdrawal. We haven't seen any of that with Amanita, which makes it extraordinarily powerful and a really wonderful ally to help one get off of these types of substances, or to help them with the issues that they were taking these substances for in the first place. So yeah, we haven't seen it, which is pretty miraculous.